Maintaining databases could involve keeping track of employees or customers, presenting products or store locations, or handling just about any structured data that you can imagine, actually. Tangora's Database Lists module gives you extraordinary power over the potentially large amounts of data in an easy-to-use interface. We'll be covering our discussion of database lists in 2 videos, and we'll also be integrating some cool features along the way. In this video, we'll be creating a database page based on an existing database to show presenters for a conference whose site we've been building. And we're also going to be integrating Tangora's Lightbox functionality in the process. Alright, here's the finished setup of the page that we'll be creating in this video. There are some speakers listed here, some search options, and I can click on a Read More link to get details on the speaker, which I've configured to open in a Lightbox. Okay, back in Tangora Manager, the first thing I'd actually like to do here is show you the data in the Modules area. So I'll go to the Modules Database Lists area and then select the list Presenters. Once I've clicked in here, we can see the overview of all the presenters for our conference. At the moment, we have 2. Additional speakers can be created by hitting the Create button. If I click on one of our presenters, we can see the fields that have been created, and I can navigate back to the overview by clicking on the breadcrumb path up here at the top. Well, so there's the data we want to present on our site, and to do so, we'll have to create a database list page. So I'll navigate to the Pages area, over to our page called Program, where I already happen to have the page Presenters as a subpage. And then I'll right-click, choose Properties, and change our page type to Database. And then I'll click OK. So then I'll click on Settings, and I'll choose the relevant database list, Presenters, and hit OK. Now I'm brought to the database list page settings with 4 tabs. Here's a quick lowdown. We'll go into more depth along the way. Under Content, we decide what we show. That is, do we want to show all our data or only a selection of our data? On the Overview and Details tabs, we set up our display for all of our data items as they're respectively displayed grouped together and, optionally, as viewed individually. Filtering is where I can set up navigation and search options for my user. In the current case, we always want to show all presenters, so for now I'm just going to stick with the default values under Content. But we have the task now of creating a layout for our Overview, where we'll see a list of all our speakers, and our Details, where we have a view that focuses on one presenter at a time. So now we set the stage. We've created our database list page and selected the database list we'd like to use, as well as what content from that list we'd like to show. Now we'll get down to creating a layout for the Overview and Details. So under the Overview tab, I'll select by View Mode the choice Block List, which will enable me to use Visual Designer. And then I'll hit Edit Layout, which will bring me directly to Visual Designer. If you experience that you come to our older tool, Table Designer, which I'll quickly hop over to now, you'll be able to change over to our Visual Designer using this button here. And Visual Designer can also be set to your default design tool here under the Administration area. Before we start, I want to ensure that the width of my current layout is compatible with the page and the site layouts into which this module layout will be displayed in. Fortunately, there's a really easy way to do this if you're too busy or too lazy to calculate the pixel widths. Just as I executed for my page layouts earlier, I'll go to the Tangora button under Properties, and then I'll choose Layout Version 2.0, which then allows me to go to my Layout tab here and create a page width in percentages. So I'll just use 100%. Job done. Right, so we could run a wizard here actually, as we demonstrated in our video on form pages, if we want a little bit of help in getting the fields on the page. But this is probably not as relevant in the context of a database list page because, well, you oftentimes want to omit the headers. We're going to approach the task simply by dragging the fields one by one because here we have a little bit more complexity in the layout that we're going to create. Hopping back to our finished example, we can see that we want a small image in the left-hand column and then a headline, name, and short text, and a link to further information. So actually the first thing I want to do is create a column structure, which I'll do by choosing Insert Columns and choosing a 2-column set. Then I could take hold of my left-hand column and insert the small image. Then I can adjust the left-hand column so it fits just around the image. But the right-hand column remains the same size as we can see here. Well, we actually want it to just fill the remainder of the space here. So what we'll do is I'll select that half of the column set, and then I'll go to Columns Formatting, Width, and choose 100%. Now if I drag this slider to preview how this will appear in the various widths, you could see the effect that we've achieved here. There's no variable width in the final result because our site design has a fixed width. So what this in effect means is that the width of the right-hand column will just be set automatically. In the right-hand column, I'll place the other relevant fields. Now what I need to do is to adjust the typographies and space around these fields. If I select a field, there is an option which appears under Merge Field Formatting called Field Settings. If I click on this, I get an interface where I could tweak the display, including typography here, which we'll set to Section Header. I'll give the headline a Header 2 or a H2 value, and name an H3 value. You may recall that we set the page's overriding headline to an H1. I won't go into too much depth here, but these are HTML tags that indicate to browsers and subsequently search engines that these are headlines. Indeed, my browser is making them bold for me and adding some space automatically. By the way, if we go into our View tab, we can see that there's an option called Select Site Layout, where we'll notice that there may be typography set up which alter the display of, for example, our section headers. The default selection should be good for you, but I just wanted to show you that setting. There's also a chance to change the preview record here under Select Record. Alrighty, I just wanted to add a bit of margin here around the Read More link. And then I actually want to give my layout a little bit more height to ensure that there's enough space between my database items. So you may need to work a little back and forth to figure out the optimal height. Back in my Overview tab, I will notice that I have a range of options for setting the order in which my items are displayed. And then there's an option here called Show Details by clicking. Now in some cases, you may want to omit the option to click to see details. But more often than not, you'll want to present your visitors details on a given database list item. Here I'll select the Read More link, which I've customized when I created my database list. Note that you could select more than one element by control clicking, and that would be command clicking for you Mac users out there. And then I have an option here called Show Details in Lightbox, which will allow us to overlay our details, where we could show a big image of our presenters without breaking the bounds of my site layout. We'll activate that in just a bit. First, let's create our detail view. I want the layout to be rather large. I have calculated 900 pixels, but you can always experiment with widths and you'll see the result as you're working. Then I'll add a column set and insert an image into the left-hand column. In the right-hand column, I'll place and style the relevant fields. I'm not going to worry about the space around my layout because I can set that in my Lightbox settings, which I'll cover next. Now I'm going to show you how to set up your Lightbox. The Lightbox technology is available in various contexts in Tangora, I'd like to mention, and what I'm showing here is just a useful example specific to database list page setup. In the Lightbox settings, I could select a graphic for my Close button if I wanted to use something other than the default, and then I have an animation option. Overlay refers to the background which will obscure the underlying content. Typically, this is a dark color with some transparency. Then there's a background color which relates to the box within which our featured content is located. Then we have padding, which will create that space around my detail layout that I mentioned earlier. And then we have width, which I'll select here to correspond to my detail layout. The height is fine, set to automatic. And then we're done. The last thing I want to cover in this video is navigation and search settings. Under the Content tab, we decided what portion of our data we'd like to present. In the current case, we actually chose to show all the data, but we could also have set requirements that our data would have to live up to in order to be shown. This is called an internal filter because it is something that is decided editorially by you. Giving your visitor search possibilities within a database is what we call external filtering because it is allowing your visitor to view selections of your data relevant to them. Setting up navigation through your data goes hand in hand, so let's take a look. First, a little detail. There is set by default a little counter text here saying showing 2 items. That's super if you want it, but it's superfluous here. Fortunately, it's easy to get rid of. Well, I could go here under Overview and create for my overall overview layout an advanced layout and then place each element exactly as I'd like them to be. And here I just omit counter text. It's lovely that we have the ability to make an advanced layout here, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to show that to you. But I could also take a more simple approach simply by navigating to the Filtering tab and then deleting the counter text string. So I could do that while maintaining the default basic layout. Let's take a closer look at the Filtering tab options. I have the option here to limit the number of items shown on a given page. We only have 2 presenters, but say I had 50. It might be nice to show only 15 at a time, or whatever you'd like. The number is set here, and then you can modify the navigation that is automatically created to browse between the various pages. I could quickly demonstrate that if I were to set the maximum per page to 1. There you go. The other thing we'll do here is build our search interface, which we may also refer to as our external filter because it gives our visitors the ability to filter the view, so to speak, to see just that item or grouping of items that meets their criteria. We want to give our visitors the ability to search after which expertise the speaker has, and also just generally search for a name or some keywords that might be in the presenter's biography text. So here's the drill. I'll hit the Edit Layout button here, and I get a layout for my filter in Visual Designer. I'm too lazy to calculate the optimal width, so I'll just let the system do that by converting the layout to Visual Designer 2.0 and then making the layout width 100%. A good trick. Here it's a good idea to use a template, so I could position my field headers. What we're creating here is actually a form built into the database module. With my newly created template selected, I'll then set in the fields people can search in. Here I'll place my expertise category, but I'll use the system's built-in search word field to allow the guest to search in the rest of the content. And then I'll also place a show button. Now I need to format the template. I'll go to Template Formatting and choose a style from the library here. Remember that you can save your own template formatting to the layouts, which will reduce your workload significantly. But the problem is here that I want to have all my fields on one line. I'll do this by removing line breaks. And this I do by going into the View tab and selecting Show Line Breaks. And then I can click off the template. And then one by one, I'll just axe the undesired line breaks. Now I'll adjust the position of the Show button. Okay, next I want to adjust the width of my search fields. Et voila. So we've just gone through a basic database list page setup and added a little flourish by using Tangora's built-in Lightbox functionality. In the next video, we'll be expanding upon the basic setup, looking at a bit more complexity in our layout, specifically in conjunction with multiple columns, focus features, and integrating image rotators in your layout.